Got the firewall temporarily bolted up, just using some AN5s. These 4 locations here, these 2 up here. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to come back here and I'm going to transfer drill through the tabs. Looks like 4 on the top, and then 1 on this side, 1 on that side. There's 1 in the center on the bottom, I see. And then on these tubes here, the diagonals coming up. I'll verify with the manual. This is just kind of what I'm looking at right now. This was tricky to get on. The holes, it'd have been better maybe if they hadn't put any holes at all on the bottom, because they were off by a good 1/8 of an inch. And when I tried to drill, of course, that hole's already there, so it's kind of walking. So I used a step bit. There's a little trick you can do with a step drill is you can kind of use it as an end mill and kind of lean on it in the direction you want to go as you're stepping in, and it'll cut in that direction. And that's what I had to do on all 4 of these across the bottom. Not a big deal, but just took a little extra work. And in order to do that, I really wanted to clamp this thing down, so I used some big 970 washers here and just some castle nuts to temporarily just hold this in place. Also, it wasn't quite centered. These holes that are in the firewall from the factory are slots, and it can shift left to right 1/4 inch. So I centered everything up the way I wanted it, clamped it down with these bolts, and then went in and did those holes down there. So just took a little bit of thinking, a little bit of time to get it right. Got all my tabs match drilled through the firewall and cleat-coat in place. Now I will remove the firewall, deburr everything. The manual says to place some foam tape on the tubes where the firewall contacts it, damp any sound, any vibration from rubbing, also probably for some abrasion protection as well. It looks like, though, interestingly, there are some, it's kind of hard to see, but there's a gap here of about 1/8 of an inch. It's not going to contact that because this weldment kind of bumps out. Got a similar situation going on over there, so not really sure on the foam tape. Definitely I'll put it across the top here. Most of that is contacting these tubes. Most of the firewall is contacting the tubes. So I'll take it off and have a look. Got the firewall back in place again after putting the foam tape on, and I gotta say, it turned out really well. I used 1/2 inch wide, this stuff here, a couple little scraps. It's a 1/2 inch wide, 1/8 inch thick. When I apply it, I kind of stretch it so it thins out to maybe about 3/32. But I just went ahead and applied it to all the tubes, all the way around. And I gotta say, there is no metal to metal contact. So sound obviously is going to get damped. Metal to metal abrasion gets taken care of. I feel like there's probably also an added benefit. This is kind of like a gasket, and it will help keep exhaust gases or whatever from in front of the firewall from maybe migrating and finding their way in, you know, through gaps in the skins and stuff and in between and into the cabin. Seems like there would be a benefit there because it really does seal it all the way around. You can see. I mean, that's like a gasket. Now it'll get compressed where when the firewall, when the engine mounts on, it'll compress in those areas a little bit. Cool. I'm actually quite pleased with how that turned out. I've rotated the fuselage on its right side on the table I've clamped it down so it's not going to move on me. And I have temporarily clamped the bottom boot cowl skin in place. I've got it flush with the Firewall, as flush as I could get it. There's a slight overhang on the Firewall, about 1 millimeter here in the center, and then it goes to perfectly flush on the ends. I have it centered perfectly right here at this clamp, and then I've centered it here. This ends up being, sorry, I'm using my metric tape measure today. This is 45 millimeters from the edge to the center of the landing gear bolt, and I also have 45 millimeters from here to here as well. So it's perfectly centered. Interestingly, when I come around and look at the inside, I have to transfer drill the tabs here. Now that particular tab there is right on the edge of the skin. You can actually see it, it wouldn't catch it entirely. I don't know that that matters. I think this is where then the skins, the boot cowl skins that wrap around the bottom, probably that's what those tabs are for, so I'm not too concerned about it. Now down here though, now I've got the clamp in place, so it's hard to see, but it would get edge clearance there. So now I know that those tolerances are due to, this is a weldment, so the placement of those tabs and whatnot are not gonna be perfect and symmetrical side to side. So not concerned about it, because I think really it's these tabs here and these tabs here that I'm mostly concerned with. So I'll go ahead and transfer drill all of these now that I have it centered in place and I'm happy with where it's at. Having some difficulty not having a helper here, being by myself, drilling, match drilling from the tabs back through into this, or through the skin. I just can't get in there, and it's just difficult. So no big deal. I'm just using my hole finder for these here. Once I get this edge done and clecoed, that should hold it enough for me to come back in there and do the other ones. The problem is I'm trying to push on it and it's flexing and I just can't get it. So I did the same thing on the rear edge and when I do the same thing down here. So this works. It's just, you know, when you're by yourself, you got to get a little creative, but where is that? Where is that tab? There it is. These hole finders are amazing. I love them. Came in real handy when I had to change a tail cone on my Cessna a few years ago. Well, not change it, I had to do some repair work, and there was no way to do it without a hole finder. All right, I've got all the holes match drilled for the tabs into the lower boot cowl skin, and everything is clecoed in place. Like I say, it was a little challenging being by myself, but with the hole finders around the edges, that worked, and that kind of held it in place enough for me to get these and cleco in place, and yeah, it worked. Got the lower skin, boot cowl skin removed, I deburred it, and I got out the supports, the stiffeners, and I primed 4 of them. And what I'm going to do now is get these measured out and cut and then notched to clear these tabs here. Got all 4 of those trimmed and notched to fit the tabs. So I can go ahead and match drill those. into those tabs so that at that point then it'll all fit up when the lower boot cowl skin goes into place. The manual calls for 2-inch hole spacing on the bottom here between the tabs. So I'm just using my rivet spacer. I can't stretch it out to 2 inches, but I've got them at roughly 1 inch, and then I'll mark every other hole. And it's not exactly 2 inches. What I did is I went from this hole here, which is one tab, here's the other tab, and I just made it as close as I could to get equal spacing between those, and it ends up at about 2 1/16. So I'll mark this one here, then I'll do the same thing between this hole, and then there's another hole here. I'll make sure I get equal spacing, close to 2 inches there, and then right there. It's going to be really close between all of them. I've got this one drilled out, and doing it the way I did with a rivet spacer between tabs, setting to approximately 2 inches. I ended up with about 2 and a 1/16 or a heavy 1/16 between these holes here, and then the rest of them were all, I mean, just a touch over 2 inches. So for all intents and purposes, that's a perfect 2 inches. I tried to run the rivet spacer from this end to this end at a close to a 2-inch setting, and it was going to miss these tabs by just a little bit. So that these other holes would have been spaced kind of weirdly. So in any case, that's a pretty equal spacing. Hopefully that works out on these, because it all really just depends on what their spacing is between these tabs. So I'll see if I get lucky like that on these other three. Got the lower boot cowl in place. I've got the stiffeners clecoed in there. I'm going to now match drill through these holes that I just put in the stiffeners. Got all those drilled out, match drilled all the way up. So I can take this off, I can deburr the skin, and I think at that point this part of the lower boot cowl skin would be complete. Next, I'm going to cleco the 5/8 boot cowl spacer strips in place along the outer perimeter of the firewall flange. So I went through my parts, I found these, here they are. These go on the sides and these go on the top. It says the hole in the strip points forward. There's a little hole in the corner. It looks like that's all that's for, is for indexing this part. So I believe that will go there, and I'll just work my way around, and hopefully these holes line up as I come around the bend there. It's a little bit tight. I'm going to bend these tabs in just a little bit. I need a little more radius on it. That did it. Gotta say, I'm pretty impressed with how this lines up around a bend. You know, even with CAD's fine, but you start doing bends, you know, the material, the radiuses of the bend, and things can really start to not duplicate what you have in CAD in the real world, and then you can get stack-ups of tolerances not matching, and then things don't fit. So I'm going to install the side ones now. Same scenario, they have a little indexing hole that will face forward on this strip. Down at the bottom here, I'm going to have to form it around this here, and I believe I'm going to make a mark here. I'm going to take this off, uncleco it. I should have noticed this before, and I'm going to form this around I think I've got an aluminum pipe that's about that radius that I'll form it around, starting at wherever I mark it here, just to kind of get me there already. I could probably bring this around, but I'd rather just form that. I've placed a mark there where I want to bend it, and now I need to make sure, because I'm going to do the same thing on the other one, I need to make sure that I do a left and a right. So in fact, I'll mark that now so that I don't accidentally make two lefts. That would suck. And I might as well just go ahead and mark this and call this a left and a right. So on the left, I need the bend to go away from my pen mark. So I'm just going to put it right there on the top of the tube there. Just kind of roll it in there. I'm going to get a smaller tube. As I start to get around here, I need a little bit of a tighter radius. Let me get something a little smaller. This piece of bar stock here. I save all this stuff from my robotics projects that I do. Little fall-offs from pieces here and there, and I know they always come in handy. Plus, I don't know if you've priced aluminum these days. It's ridiculous. So it's hard to throw stuff away, knowing that I'm going to be able to use it again at some point, some way, even if it's for just bending a piece of aluminum over another piece of aluminum. There we go. That should be a pretty nice fit around there. I'll go test fit it and see. Yeah, that's nice. Just a little bit of Cleco holding that pressure in there. So, good. I'll make the same bend on the other piece. Okay, I can go back to fitting this piece in place. And that Cleco is going to interfere with that one. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to leave these previous two out and just come in with the bottom one. I've got the left strip Clecoed in place. Everything worked out, everything lined up good. So I will duplicate this on the right side. Next, the manual says to fit a boot cowl skin up, side skin, and check the fit. Well, I put a piece of tape on station number 2 tube, and I drew a line on the center, like the manual says to do. And it says that this should overlap and that you'll trim. But in my case, now I just kind of have this clamped. I haven't done a whole lot yet, but in my case, it fits perfectly with right down the center. So I don't know if this is a change they've made. They've kind of trimmed these back, or I just got lucky, or maybe I just haven't found out yet that mine doesn't quite fit right. And maybe that's the case, because interestingly, they tell you, if you come over here, they tell you previously, in the previous step that I just did, to Cleco the 5/8 inch boot cowl straps on the Firewall. Cleco from the inside. It says because you're going to fit the skin up. Well, yeah, how do I fit the skin up? I've got these Clecos bumping out. So I don't really know how you're supposed to do that, because this really needs to sit on the surface it's going to sit on to see how everything else is going to fit. So I don't know. And yet you do want this strip in here, because that adds a little thickness. That's going to kind of determine where things sit too. So I'm not really sure what I want to do about this yet. I think I'll just remove the Clecos, and I'll just Cleco clamp it in place with that strip sandwiched in between. I don't think it matters if it's exactly in place for that. That'll let this set down tight, and then I can come in and really verify that is what it needs to be. And I'm thinking what I might do is run a ratchet strap across the tube here and down, just to hold this tight against the lower longeron, tight against it that way, and tight up against it that way. Just make sure everything is good and tight and fits right. So I think that's how I'm going to proceed with this. I'm not sure why they tell you to do it this way, unless there's something I'm missing, and that's entirely likely. I think going to be a good way to do this is take a few Clecos out, clamp it, take a few out, clamp it. That way that strip stays where it's supposed to stay. And presumably the skin stays where it needs to stay. Well, here's my setup. I've gone in there and I've just cleco clamped everything in place with the 5/8 inch boot cowl strip sandwiched in there all the way down around the bottom. And then what I did is I took a ratchet strap and went down to that corner there. The only reason I did that, I was thinking I'll go across the top, but this whole thing tapers, so the strap was sliding forward. So I just took it behind the Station 2 post there at the corner, and that kind of vectors it back that way. And then I just taped the strap here so it wouldn't migrate forward on me, and just strapped it. Didn't put a lot of tension, just enough to hold it in place. And that way I'm guaranteed that this is tight, this skin is tight up against the longeron, both on the side and on the bottom. And then I've got a good tight fit here. And when I do that and I look at my line, here's my line that I marked on the center. It is exactly on the center. So like I say, I don't know if I lucked out there or what, but I'll take it. So it's probably good to say that that's okay and then proceed to the next step, which I believe is match drilling. This tab here to hold this in place. It's kind of a scary proposition because once I do that, that's where this thing sits, but it looks good. And like I say, everything's tight there. So I'm going to match drill these tabs across the top here. It says to work from top to bottom. So I'll do these 3, and there's some along the edge here, some along the front edge, and then of course underneath there's a couple. So I'm just gonna do it. I've got those all drilled and clecoed from the top down. I didn't do the bottoms because it said only to do the tabs in the sides. So I started to, then I looked at the manual and realized I should wait on that. So this side is good. I'm going to go ahead now and focus my attention on the right side and duplicate the same thing and hope that I get a similar fit. Got the right side fit up, and it's almost exactly like the left side. The only difference is the right side is the skin does extend about 90 thousandths, 80 or 90 thousandths past my center line that I put on the tube. But honestly, that could be within the margin of error of me marking the center line on this tube. I just kind of eyeballed the center at the top and at the bottom and struck a line. So, you know, in looking at it here, it's hard to say. It feels like it might extend just a little bit past the center of the tube. Everything fit pretty nicely. It wasn't as perfect as the left side in terms of where it ended up on the tube. You can see this one is 40 thousandths past my center line, maybe 50 thousandths at the top, and it is maybe 20 thousandths down here. So I just don't even feel like that's worth trying to trim. Everything else, the fit was quite good. I'm going to wrap up this episode here. We've got both boot cowl side skins fit in place. We've got the lower boot cowl skin fit in place. We're certainly going into part 3 of cage prep. And part 3 of cage prep is effectively going to be part 2 of boot cowl. So on the next episode, we'll be doing the boot cowl skins that wrap up and over the top of the forward fuselage area, kind of where the instrument panel is. There are 3 skins that get fit there, and I'll be doing that in part 3. And thanks for watching. If you enjoy the content, please like and subscribe. See you on the next one.